This is Hidden Killers Live with Tony Brueski, Stacey Cole, and Todd Michaels.
And the insanity continues on in the case of Ellen Greenberg. More than 14 years after she was found in her Philadelphia apartment, the city has doubled down again on calling it self-inflicted, unaliving by oneself. The word YouTube doesn't like, you know what I'm talking about. The latest 2025 review by Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Lindsay Simon was supposed to bring clarity. It was part of the settlement from the agreement that her family had with the state that they'd re-examine this and, I don't know, maybe actually do their job this time. Instead, it's raised even more questions. The original pathologist has now recanted, saying the ruling was wrong. It didn't influence the new medical examiner at all. The family says they've been shut out of the promised re-examination, and the public is asking how more than 20. They've added more to it. 23, I believe we're at now. Stab wounds, including to the back of the neck, can still be written off as self-inflicted. Today, former prosecutor Eric Fatt is joining us, defense attorney, to look at what's left legally, procedurally, and morally. Where we sit right now, that's the big question. Where do the Greenbergs go from here, Eric?
Tony, it seems like the Greenbergs may have exhausted any kind of legal avenue that they can pursue. There's no appellate process for a medical examiner's findings. You typically cannot go to the court and say, hey, we think this person got it wrong. We want some sort of remedy, although that is kind of what happened in earlier proceedings in this case. At any rate, there is just not much legal traction beyond what they've done. They've exhausted all of the traditional avenues that one would expect, and I'm just not sure what other options they might have at this point.
It obviously has been their mission since her passing for reality to meet the report itself. Some say, this is reality. This is science. This is what it is. One of those people, Sam Goldberg, her ex-fiance, who had survived this, obviously. He was the one on the 911 call. He was the one featured, at least he wasn't in it as voluntarily being in it, but they used the 911 call and talked about his story. Sam Goldberg has maintained his innocence through all of this. There's never been any charges against him, and yeah, he's an innocent man. But he's recently made a statement, and I just want to kind of start out here with that. Sam Goldberg's remarks. Only the second time he's ever spoken publicly about Ellen's death. His previous statement sent via email to CNN, this was in fall of 24, reaffirmed his belief that Ellen took her own life and condemned what he described as lies, distortions, and falsehoods spread about him over the years, saying, quote, when Ellen took her own life, it left me bewildered. She was a wonderful and kind person who had everything to live for, he wrote at the time. Despite official claims, Ellen's case continues, obviously, to spark a lot of public outrage. He did make some more comments about this in a brief interview that he just gave, I believe, like yesterday, in terms of our recording. Sam Goldberg admitted the ongoing scrutiny has taken a toll. Allegedly, he said this. Things suck. It's been awful, he said. Quote, referring to the intense media attention surrounding the death of Ellen Greenberg. When asked whether he felt he had been screwed over by the recent Hulu documentary investigating Ellen's final days, Sam Goldberg allegedly replied, yeah, I have been. It's awful and it sucks, but I have nothing else to say. That's what some of the reporting is as of right now. And look, if he did have nothing to do with this, it does suck. It would be horrible to have this following you around your entire adult life if this tragedy, took place, and it looks absolutely horrible, but you had nothing to do with it. And as of right now, we don't know that he had anything to do with it. A weird 911 call doesn't mean he did anything. I mean, that's how he reacted to things. And it's not how you or I would necessarily react. Is it how some other folks out there would react? Sure. There's plenty of people who would react strangely to something like that. But strange is in the eye of the beholder. It doesn't mean that someone is necessarily guilty of anything. And I guess that's where I want to begin on some of this. If it weren't, if his tone in the 911 call were not what it is, and we all listen to this thing and we go, that just seems disconnected. It seems weird. It seems aloof. Oh, there's a knife in her chest. Like, how did you not see? I mean, there's a lot of how did you nots when you look at this. But again, none of it means that he actually did something other than find his fiancée dead. That's where this all begins. If he had acted differently, if there was, I guess, what we'd want more shock, more. I don't know what one would want in that tape. If it was different than what it is, would there be this much scrutiny around this case?
You know, we like you sort of alluded to, we all have expectations as to how a human might react in this horribly traumatic scenario. And sometimes people act differently than our expectations would hold. And so, but yeah, I think, you know, when you listen to that 911 call, it certainly raised some eyebrows for some. And I think that, you know, when that is paired with a lot of the other curious evidence or non-evidence and developments. And then certainly when that is paired with the medical examiner's report and sort of how there's been some back and forth over the years in terms of whether this was her unaliving herself or something else, it really does start to raise some eyebrows as to what's going on here. And then there were some I guess, curious involvement from one of his relatives that was permitted to go to the scene. There are just some things where folks are like, hey, wait a sec, that doesn't seem right.
Yeah, there's a lot that just doesn't make sense here. It just, I want to know about the involvement of the family member. The timing of that is what feels so ugly and so wrong, because when you're in a situation like this, you don't necessarily call a family member, you call emergency services. So what was going on? What role does this person have to play in this whole thing?
Yeah, I think that's a big question on everyone's mind. You know, they're trying to get all of these puzzle pieces. Some of them have gone missing over the years. Some of them are no longer really attainable, and that's what happens when you have cold cases that you know just linger for years and years. And so, yeah, definitely a lot of unanswered questions, really across the board on this.
The thing is, they did nothing illegal. And I think that's important to point out. Yes, I mean, optics don't look great. It is weird that from the evidence that we do have is that there was calls to the family member, the attorney, before to emergency services while he was locked out of the apartment. And then the family member, the attorney, shows up and gets the digital devices out of there, wanted to get some artifacts for her funeral, allegedly. That's what the story, as far as we understand, is. An uncle who didn't even really know her, there's no reason for him to go in and get digital artifacts to take her digital devices. You would think they would go to her parents, not the uncle of him by marriage. That was an attorney that comes in. But they did everything legally. They didn't, like, there was nothing that was, hey, can we sneak in here and get some of this stuff out of this house while nobody's looking? No, that's not what happened. The police released the scene. They did everything that they legally could do. And I'm playing the devil's advocate on here more and more, because if you're in this sort of situation, and let's say you take whoever did it out of the equation, whether Sam has anything to do with it or not, and as of right now, he doesn't. If you legally can get in and get these things out of here, because you don't know how this is going to be spun, especially if she did do it herself, you know the media is going to look at the partner as the culprit right away, regardless, no matter what. And the optics of this don't look great. It wouldn't be hard if you're not an idiot, and I don't think Sam is. If you're just looking at this going, shit, this looks really horrible for me. I had nothing to do with this, but this looks horrible. And I don't really have an alibi around it other than I went to the gym. And you can see I wasn't in here, but this looks bad. What options do I have? You're talking to your attorney family. They're like, well, they probably are looking at those things going, Is there cell phones? Is there this? Is there that? Let's get rid of those things before anything can be gleaned off of them. Not necessarily criminal to anything you've done, but what could someone glean? What could someone take out of context, change around, manipulate to fit a specific narrative? Because let's be honest, that's what the police are going to usually do in some case. They usually go down a narrative route that they have, and they're going to take pieces of evidence and try and fit the blocks, whether they're square or circle, into the same hole and try and make it fit. So honestly, some of the actions that were taken here, if you have the legal mindset and prowess behind you saying, hey, these are some things you maybe should do to protect yourself right now, he exercised them. He didn't do anything illegal.
But I also feel like if you haven't done anything wrong, why do you need to hide?
Because you can't trust the fucking police.
I hate to think that in
That's
every
the reality.
scenario, though.
How do you not think that? You've been doing this show for how long?
When I worked at the vet clinic for 8 years, I worked with the canine officers. They are some of the most wonderful people I've ever worked with. I would trust them with my life.
The animals were not investigating this. They didn't get like Lassie and
handlers.
Frodo. And like Lassie and Frodo came in and said, no murder, we're done.
Whatever. No, the handlers. I mean, I don't think every cop is a bad cop.
No, they're not.
I don't want to believe that there's all this conspiracy. So my thing is, and it goes down to, you're sitting on the couch with your partner and they're hiding their phone from you. Well, let me see your phone. If you're not hiding anything, let me see it. Not that I would do that, but I'm just saying, what do you have to hide? Do you not want them to see the text messages that were leading up to this day?
Anything can be read into incorrectly. Eric?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's fair points on both sides. And look, I do criminal defense now, former prosecutor, so I've seen both sides. And these were some savvy legal moves. And that's one thing that I, of course, can't object to. You need to protect yourself, especially when you're innocent, especially when you don't want to be wrongly implicated, when you know that sort of those crosshairs from the law enforcement are going to look immediately to the spouse, or the fiance in this case. That is the first place they're going to look. And like Stacey said, perhaps there were some text messages that could, out of context, be misinterpreted.
Sure.
And be suggestive and sort of feed into a narrative that the fiance had something to do with it when he didn't. And so certainly I can't fault him for taking legal maneuvers to protect himself. But common sense and lay people see that and say, hey, does he have something to hide? I'm not saying he does, but it's a question that has come up repeatedly.
Do innocent people get nailed? I mean, I know, I know the answer is duh, but let's just say he had nothing to do with any of this. Mm-hmm. She unalived herself, end of story.
Yeah.
Why does it feel like something is there?
Why would you walk yourself into something that if the perfect storm aligned itself, which it did, and that's what I think a lot of this case is a perfect storm, is you have the snowstorm is going on. They're not sending out the homicide detectives basically because of weather, because it's like, well, the people on the scene are saying it's a suicide. They're ignorantly just taking Sam's word that the door was, that the security guard was there, and that he saw him open the door, and that it was locked from the inside. So they're operating on that as fact incorrectly. And look, we can argue and say whether or not the door was latched from the inside or not. The official story still is it was. But the fact that they're just taking someone on their word is the insane part of this whole thing. At the end of the day, if there's anyone to blame, it's the cops. Because the cops fucked this thing up 7 ways to Tuesday. It's not how Sam acted. It's not how it's the cops fucked this thing up every which way.
That's true. My only point, and I rarely stick my face in on this thing, but my question is, how fast did he process, hey, I might be in trouble here, and then, hey, I'm going to get my uncle involved.
That's weird.
It is weird. And I think most people would go, oh my God, my loved one is dead.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be your mindset to kind of start thinking the process that, hey, this could be hung on me. I'm not sure that the average person in a situation like that would think that way and call Uncle so-and-so in his
Sure.
in a law office.
I agree. I don't think the average person would. He had family who was high, very powerful attorneys. I don't know that he was the average person in terms of legal thinking. If you were, I certainly wouldn't think that way anymore, but we've been doing this for a while and I have a good thing in my mind, a good repertoire of how this shit works. And if something like that happened to me, I'd be fucking thinking that immediately if something happened that I had nothing to do with. I'd be mourning, but I'd also be like, shit, I got to protect myself because this could look really bad. The average person, no, not. But we don't know. We just don't know, what prism he's coming from, what education he has in that area, what mindset he has in that area to know. Maybe I should be watching out for myself right now because this looks pretty shitty.
We all need an uncle who's a lawyer in our families, apparently,
Yeah.
just in case something like this happens.
We don't know. He could have, and one may go, well, that's heartless, whatever. We're talking about emotions, but we're not talking about facts and how we would act. We don't know how he would act. And it could be somewhat explainable in a weird way. That's just the weird part about this whole damn case is we don't know the answers. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, no, Tony, on board with all that. And to your prior point, yeah, the cops totally botched this. I can't think of a death case, even when it seemed to be an apparent self-unaliving, where they didn't have crime scene investigation, at least go in and take a look. At least, let's assess this. Let's do this pursuant to protocol. And especially in this circumstance where it wasn't a clear, gunshot to the head and it's over or something. With the scene how it was and the knife being there, you bring in CSI, you have them do testing, you have them do DNA testing, fingerprint testing. There are an analysis that can be done as to the angle of the blade as it went in and things like that. My understanding is none of that was done. And in fact, then the apartment was professionally cleaned. And so if there was any evidence lingering around that CSI wasn't called in to look at, it was gone.
Yeah.
And again, all signed off on by the police. That's the weird part about this whole damn thing. It was all signed off on. So then we go in the road of, okay, was this signed off on out of ignorance? Out of it's another case, let's just keep this moving. We already, we're basing our decisions on this and we're not really thinking this clearly enough. Who's ever making these calls isn't qualified or shouldn't be making these calls. There's so many ways that it spirals off from there. What's the reason that the police allowed this to happen? They didn't consider it a crime scene. It appears it was just solely based on Sam's account. And look, Sam's not the one who makes the call of whether this is a crime scene or not. That's the police. Mm-hmm. So then you go, well, was someone greasing the police? Was someone saying, well, we're not going to do this because you're connected here or there? That's where we get down the conspiracy road. But again, other than there was a legally savvy uncle that came in and did play by the rules, I don't know what else there is.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I think part of it could potentially be chalked up to police incompetence. You look at the fact that the police released the cell phone to the fiance's family, not the decedent's family, which is bizarre.
Weird.
But back in that time, the cell phones weren't necessarily the trove of evidence that they are now, or at least not everyone was aware of that in law enforcement. And so this could have just been sort of, they took Sam's word for it and they were ready to move on, and certainly some blunders were made.
Is there any, and obviously information is what would in a perfect world, solve any of this. But obviously, people are already grounded in here's what I think happened, and that's where they're going to be. But if you were to get, I guess the question is there any world in which it makes sense for Sam to say a word about this today? To go, look, here's my story. Here's everything that happened, and it's assuming he'd had nothing to do with it. I know, like, here's what this does look shitty. Here's actually what happened, and line it out. And it may be very similar to what we already know in the police reports, if he's not, contradicting any of that as it is. But is there a world in which speaking up about this would be helpful to him if he's being persecuted for this if and obviously never been charged, or is it always going to be the best course of action, if you're his attorney, to say, just shut up. There's nothing you're going to say that's going to improve this whatsoever. And I know you had nothing to do with it, but your voice will not help anything. It will only fan the flames no matter what.
Yeah, Tony, I mean, as a human, we can all understand if a person is being wrongly accused, they want to clear the record, especially if this is like a nationally publicized case and, strangers are commenting on some misdeeds that they think you did. Of course, you would want to be vocal about setting the record straight. That being said, legally, I think it's absolutely not in his best legal interest to say anything, even if he is 100% innocent. There is such a social pressure and a push on social media and elsewhere to reopen this case, to try to find out what actually happened. And if you're on the government side, the prosecution side, the fiance is, like I said, usually a convenient first look. And there's no other suspects of which I'm aware that have been credibly developed. And so him saying something, he could misstate something. He could misremember something. This was years ago. There are just so many pitfalls to making that statement that it could do way more harm than good, even for a person who's 100% innocent.
So if you had a client that was Sam, and you saw these circumstances, and he said to you, this documentary's come out, I feel like I have to say something. What would you advise him to do at this point? I mean, other than keep your mouth shut?
I think there are two options. One is shut the fuck up. The second is you can release I would consider possibly a very brief written statement, because a written statement can't be cross-examined. You can't be peppered with questions and be caught off guard. Yeah. And you could release sort of a very brief synopsis of what you believe happened. But that being said, there's still, he could put himself closer to the scene than he wanted by accident. He could, talk about prior issues that they were having in their relationship. Every relationship has that, but people are just looking for something to put their, hang their hat on and try to solve this case, outside of law enforcement and inside law enforcement, and that is just risky business.
And that's the thing with this. At the end of the day, I mean, he has made like little statements here and there, and every single time he does, it's like, oh, that horrible human being. How could he live like this? It's like, what if he didn't do it? What if he didn't do it? That's how he can live like that, because maybe he didn't do it. Right. That and might Tony, be your answer. But if it doesn't fit what people want it to be, but that's the thing. We have to get off of the box of what we want it to be to answer all of our questions, and more, well, what actually exists here. And that's the problem. We don't have that information. And the gatekeepers to that are not Sam. They're not his uncle. It's the city of Philadelphia. It's the court system. It's the law itself that is stopping this from getting any further investigation. And what is the reason for that? Is it some big conspiracy? The family has power and they're saying, don't investigate this because it's going to expose this and we don't want that exposed. That's a lot of people to be involved in that conspiracy. It really, in any conspiracy, it takes a lot of people, and that's why a lot of conspiracies aren't real, because they just don't work. It's too many people involved. Somebody's going to slip up and say at some point, yeah, they tried to grease me and say, don't say this. We're talking all these years now. I would think maybe somebody at this point would have come back and said that. The medical examiner has come back. The original medical examiner has come back and said, yeah, I would change my ruling if given the opportunity. He can't do that. He can't go back and change the ruling. But he says, based on the information that they have now, I would have ruled differently. It doesn't mean jack shit anymore. But it is what he's said. At least he would have said, what would it have been? It wouldn't have been homicide. It could have been homicide, or it could have been undetermined. Undetermined is the word I'm looking for. So it could have been any of those. But again, hindsight's 2020. You had a lot of people who were involved in this that they dug into in that documentary, and not one said, yeah, the police said, come over here, let's be real shady about this, and let's just tamper this down. A lot of them don't remember certain things. But again, you're talking a case that's how many years old? What were you talking about that day at your workplace on that 20 whatever year it was where this took place all those years ago in this specific corner of your office. Who's going to know that? And yes, it's a murder, but this is what they do day in and day out. So it's another day at the office for most of the people in question here.
Oh yeah, I mean it's the age of the case presents so many problems, especially with that initial misstep by law enforcement of not having a crime scene investigation go there, and then the apartment's cleaned. Where's the evidence? You're not going to uncover any new evidence, at least in terms of physical forensic kind of stuff. And then when it comes to witness recollection, my gosh, we're talking years and years. I can't tell you what I had for breakfast last week on Wednesday. It's to expect that kind of recollection and then to build a homicide case based on it is such a tall order.
What was your reaction to the actual report itself? The fact that it came back as suicide again were you surprised at the justifications as to what they used in this to double down on it again and essentially have lightning strike twice? What was your reaction to the overall report?
Yeah, I was a bit incredulous on parts of it. One thing I think everybody, the Greenbergs, the public, probably law enforcement, everybody wanted to know, hey, medical examiner, how can you explain how there are 10 or so stab wounds to the back of the neck and that this is still a person unaliving themselves? And there wasn't at least in my review, I was not satisfied with the explanation the new medical examiner gave. I thought she should focus on that if she was going to maintain the finding and say, hey, look, this is obviously, and really all she said is that it, kind of appears abnormal or something, but I think it still could be self-inflicted. There wasn't a ton of reasoning. She didn't cite studies and other cases to my knowledge on that specific issue. So I thought she was going to address that much more thoroughly, and she sort of glossed over what was really the most important piece of information in the autopsy.
And that's disturbing. I mean, there's a lot in here where it was just, well, it could have been from this. And that's your answer? Just, it could have been this, it could have been that. I mean, the knife wound that would have severed the spine, well, that could have happened during the autopsy. They could have been a little too rough, basically, with the body. And then that might have made the incision look a little bit deeper than it was. I get it, in theory, but that's a big if. There's a lot of big ifs. Yeah. What's that?
I was just sorry to interrupt you, but that's fine if they're not fine, but if they're going to speculate on something like that, what evidence do you have that happened? Did you talk to the doctors? Did you, look into the medical records associated with that? What evidence do you have? Or are you just kind of guessing, hey, this could be it? That doesn't sound like science.
No, it doesn't.
And we're basing, everyone is basing opinions based on what was the lack thereof documentation of this case and the inaccuracies of the documentation of the case. And only in one report does it state that Sam was there with the guard. And that's what everybody goes, well, Sam says he was there with the security guard. One report says that. Who's to say they didn't screw up that report too? If we're going to go down one road and go, well, this is really screwed up and this is inaccurate, why would it not be? We can't just pick and choose what's convenient for our narrative to say, well, that's inaccurate over there, but it says this here, so this must be factual. There's a lot. I mean, it's a bungled thing everywhere. I don't trust any piece of this report.
Yeah, there's just so many holes. There's so many questions that it leaves open. Yeah, I was surprised by the new medical examiner's report, and especially when the affidavit from the original medical examiner said, hey, looking at this, I actually would change my finding to something other than, or I forget exactly how they worded it, but something other than self-inflicted, or I don't know exactly. But then the new medical examiner says, no, you're right the first time, bro. And that's just a weird way that played out.
It is. And I mean, obviously does this feel more like to you like we're, because there's two ways of looking at this. There's the emotional way where it's like they're trying to cover up for a murder, and they don't want somebody to get in trouble that shouldn't, that they don't want to get in trouble, or they're covering up their ass so they don't get sued further and they don't have more liability legally and financially. And when it comes to entities, they don't have emotions. They operate on finance. So if you are liable, if you were to say, we really fucked this up over here, your best interest is to continue producing reports if you're the one charged with producing the report of saying, no, we did everything right by the book. It's good. There's no incentive to like have self-reflection and say this was incorrect. It's going to cost you a ton of money and jobs and credibility. Why would you do that? It's not, I mean, morally, yes, that's why you would do that. But again, you're talking about an entity. Entities don't have morals.
Yeah, anytime there's the risk of legal exposure, especially to a government entity, I've seen so often they will take the most untenable positions and then reaffirm them. They'll rubber stamp them down the line and say, nope, that government was right all along. Don't sue us. But I'm dealing with that with the city of Denver right now, where they're taking this outlandish position and they're just like sticking to their guns, where everyone is like, what are you talking about? Let's have some honest analysis here. And I think some people are questioning just how much of that we had in the second report.
So, Eric, how much does public pressure, how much of an influence can it have in a case like this? Because the world is looking at this case now. It's not just Philadelphia. It's not just the Greenberg family. It's people like all three of us, all four of us here. Yep. I mean, there's public pressure now. So does that play a role in this case being cracked open again?
I think, Stacey, absolutely. And especially with the emergence of social media, the emergence of the internet, and just publicly accessible information about cases. 20 years ago, all three of us, we may never have heard about this. Right. But now, like, everybody and their brothers heard about it. And you look at the Menendez brothers case, that had been a cold case. Those people were sitting in prison and no one had taken a look at them for years. Then there's this media piece, this documentary. Then there's a docudrama about it. And all of a sudden, the world is watching. That case is reopened. Now, they haven't been released yet, but it can absolutely result in new movement and motion in cases that haven't been touched for some time.
It's a journey that I'm sure they're going to continue to try to go down and continue to exhaust all legal options. I feel horrible for that family. They're just trying to get answers. And had there just been, at the end of the day, had there just been a proper investigation into this, looking into what actually happened, proper interviews with people, proper looking at digital devices. They should have looked at his. They should have looked at hers. They should have looked at everything. All of that should have been examined. Had we done that and had it all come out clear, Sam wouldn't have to be dealing with this now if he had absolutely nothing to do with it, because there'd be evidence that says, see, look, this is what this was. But because we went to the world of things being either covered up or just not investigated, and that's a lot of it, just not investigated, not looked at. You have all this space, all this time for all these different things that could have taken place between now and then. I don't know that there's going to be one person who knows what ultimately happened, and she's dead.
Yeah.
And I mean, unless she was murdered by someone, that person would know too, if they're alive. We still have cases today that pop up where it's like, oh, that wasn't who they thought it was. It was this drifter that showed up. Stranger things have happened. But there is evidence, I would say, in this case, as much as people don't like there is to be, that it could have been a suicide. There are a lot of hesitation wounds on her body that they're not necessarily indicative of someone attacking someone. There's not typically hesitation wounds on that sort of a death. And it is insanely rare that a woman or anyone would unalive themselves in this way, shape, or form. But there is the 0.0001%, and maybe we're looking at it.
I still want to know how she got the one in the back of her neck, though. I mean,
like this.
Yeah, I do a lot of stretching in the morning. I'm really flexible. I just, that trajectory.
I think I can manage it. I mean, you could. I mean, these are not impossible things to do. Why would you do it? Why would you choose it? That doesn't make any sense to anybody.
It just feels unlikely.
None of it feels likely. You're exactly right. None of it feels likely, but sometimes the unlikely is exactly what happened. And I don't know, maybe that is the answer in this case. None of us know the answer to that, but I think it's important that we look at all directions, because I feel like it's easy to jump on this one and go, this is what it is. I don't know. I just don't know. And because one cover-up is going on over here to protect one's ass for a horrible, horrible investigation, which anybody can admit was a botched, absolute shit investigation. That doesn't mean it's a cover up for someone else's actions for homicide. It could be 100% to cover up for not properly examining this thing. I don't know. And I think that's the thing that we have to say on this is we don't know. And it'd be lovely if authorities at this point could say, well, let's do what we can with what we have to look further into this. And if it still leads us into the unknown and we still have to say we don't know, then we don't know. But again, that would require opening themselves up to some liability. And I don't think they want to do that. So, messed up case.
Yeah, that's all I mean, before we got started, I had made a note card, and I won't pull it up because it messes with my camera, but, well, maybe I will. Todd, I'm going to do it. I'm going in. This is my response every time we talk about this case.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are listening on the podcast, it says, are you fucking kidding me? Mm-hmm. It's how I feel every time we talk about it, because none of it makes sense to me. We had this wonderful discussion just now, and I still am unsettled about it.
I am too. I have no answers. But that's where, again, it's like, let's look at all the angles. Because it's easy to get wrapped up in the emotion of this, of what should be. But there's a lot of should that isn't in this. Let's talk about Donna Adelson, our good friends over there, digging into what happens next for Donna, convicted in September for orchestrating the murder for hire of her former son-in-law, Dan Markel. Her motion for a new trial denied. Her defense team now preparing for an appeal. But what are the actual odds of overturning a life sentence in a case this public, this emotional, and this tied to the family? And what about the ripple effects? Harvey's courtroom outburst, Wendy's uncharged status, and Charlie's own pending appeal? Eric Faddis, former prosecutor, defense attorney, here with us to help unpack what is going on with the Adelsons and what may be next. We know Donna's not happy. She claims, I swear, oh my life, I had nothing to do with this. You got me, assholes. But she claims that they're going to try and appeal. What sort of grounds do you think they have going forward, Eric?
I think the appellate grounds are going to likely mirror some of the grounds that they asserted to try to get a new trial. And so, chiefly we're looking at judicial bias. They're saying that the judge was not impartial, that he was favoring the side of the prosecution. They list some colorable reasons for that. And then also sufficiency of evidence. Hey, the jury got it wrong and they just didn't have, there's actually not enough evidence here. And then lastly, the ground that might be most significant is the potential juror misconduct. That one sort of sticks out to me, but I think generally speaking, though, that's going to be the thrust of the appeal on those sort of three prongs there.
All right.
Well, just one quick question for Eric. How often do we end up with jury misconduct? Because I feel like the cases that we've been talking about recently, there's a lot of that discussion. Does it happen often, or is this just kind of a rare occurrence and we just keep landing on it?
It comes up way more than you think, Stacey. And like we've talked about, jurors they're not professional jurors. They're, Sam the butcher and they're, Marjorie the accountant. And they get these legal rules from the judge. Hey, you can't do this. You can do this. But especially in a long trial, it's hard to be perfect about those things, especially when you have no experience being a juror. And so you'd be surprised how much sort of jurors deviating from court orders comes up in high stakes criminal cases.
Is it just come up because it's just one of those boxes like, okay, we have to appeal this, and let's check the box, because whether or not there's anything or not that's there, like we can try and make something sound like maybe it's juror misconduct even when it's not. I mean, is there a way when you're examining that of going, well, this is clearly juror misconduct, or we can frame this as juror misconduct?
I think you've got to be mindful of a trend that has been occurring in the law, and that's that juror misconduct usually it gives you a higher likelihood of overturning a conviction than some other ground like sufficiency of the evidence. That ground almost I don't know that I've ever seen that work in a homicide case on appeal, but the juror misconduct one that can have traction, and because the jurors are the ones making the ultimate guilt determination, and if they did something that constitutes misconduct, appellate courts look at that closely and they give it significant weight.
What specifically are they arguing here as jury misconduct in the Adelson case?
So my understanding, and I haven't read any appeal or anything like that, but that one of the jurors, I believe, disclosed that they were on the jury, and you're not supposed to tell anybody that you're on the case. Is that going to change the outcome at the end of the day? Probably not. But there was some other comments from one juror. I believe that they were on a podcast, if I'm not mistaken. Ooh. And they made some comments that suggested they may have considered something they shouldn't have considered, or something along those lines. And so that's my understanding as to the basis.
And jurors are allowed to go and talk, and if they want to. They don't have to.
But not during the trial, though, right?
Not during the trial, no. But after, they can go and share whatever they'd like to about their experience being a juror. How often, I mean, are we seeing that as being more of a problem than it ever has been in the past? I mean, we are in a relatively new world where immediately after, now you have every podcast in the world that wants to get a juror on to talk about what their experience was like. It's not just like the major networks that are going after, a juror from a very high profile trial. There's a room for everybody. And even, people who may not be talking are probably getting 50,000 invites. Please come on. Please tell what's going on. Does that complicate your world in terms of the legal world? Once a case is settled, once it's done, you have to worry about the stupid things a juror may say on a podcast. And I'm not calling the juror stupid, but I'm saying they may misspeak. They may say things in a certain way that then the legalese world is going to look at and go, well, they said it like this, they must mean that. And then they'll fill in the blanks and say, well, because it was presented this way, that shows that they were doing something unscrupulous behind the scenes, or they were taking something into consideration that they shouldn't have in a certain way, when they're just reflecting on their experience. They're not attorneys. They're telling things the way a lay person would. Has this created a whole new hunting ground, if you will, for appeals when it comes to defending a client?
Oh yeah, 100%. I used to tell folks, kind of back in the day, that hey, I've done like 58 jury trials. I went and talked with the jurors, so I know what was going on in their mind. I have the sacred knowledge that no one has. And now, with podcasts and social media, everybody's hearing from these jurors, and you're right, they're hearing from them in ways that can be relevant to appeals. And certainly a savvy defense attorney can look at a statement and say, hey, it appears this juror was influenced by something they weren't allowed to consider. When, like you said, it might be an innocent statement, it might be a misstatement, it might be a misrecollection. They may have just stated something inartfully. But now you better believe all of those appellate attorneys are watching these true crime podcasts after the case is done. You saw the Diddy jurors, at least one of them went on a podcast. And so, it is fertile ground for appeals and access to jurors that is so expansive and to such a degree that we've never had.
Donna is 75, Harvey's 81. Appeals take a long time. Just in your professional opinion on the things that they're bringing to light right now, saying these are what we're going to be talking about, where do you think it goes?
I think it is such a high bar to get a conviction overturned on appeal. And I think that Donna's chances are very slim. It's going to take some time. It's going to take months, if not, depending on what happens during the appellate's process, it could take years. And like you said, Donna is no spring chicken. And we've seen folks actually pass during as their appeals were pending. And one thing that's sort of bizarre is that in most states, that means that the conviction is not final and that person is not labeled a murderer, even if a jury said they were.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, if the appellate process has not been finalized, most states will categorize that as a non-conviction.
Wow.
Yikes.
That's one of those things where it's like you think the system works this way until you realize the system doesn't work that way. And it's like, Jesus, wow, really? Let's talk about what actually took place in that courtroom the other day during the sentencing. You had Harvey, let's start with Harvey, gave his victim impact statement. And it was basically accosting the judge and accosting the jury and the Markel family, the surviving victims here in this case, of which his son and wife have now been convicted of conspiring to murder. And he had the nerve to go up there. Just the optics of this were insane, of going up there and insulting them and saying that they're lying about their access to their grandchildren, when we can actually look at the record and see what the reality is. And it is what it is. What the hell was that? I mean, what? I mean, I don't even know. There's a lot of angles I want to ask about this, but I just want to get your visceral human reaction first.
Oh gosh, I mean, the audacity, right? He was pretty aggro in there, and no one was really off limits, like you said. He's going after the judge. He's going after the victim's family. It's been determined that this was a victim now. I'm sure he has a lot with which he wants to unburden himself with respect to this whole family saga, and I understand that. But you gotta read the room a little bit, and you gotta make sure also that you're not harming the chances of your family members as their cases continue to proceed.
It was like a petulant child where it's, you're not going to get the toy. I want the toy. Well, we're not going to get the toy. Then they grab a toy and like chuck it across the store, and then grab another custard, like somebody's cart, and then shove it down the way.
I feel like you've seen this before.
Now you're really not getting the toy.
Yeah.
And it just kept going, and then Donna joins in the insanity, like, oh, I'm not getting the toy. Well, I'm going to show you. And at the end of the day, it's just chaos, and they get carted away.
Eric, would you expect your attorney, if you were Donna, wouldn't you expect your attorney to read over those statements and maybe make some suggestions about not doing that?
Oh, gosh, of course. Anytime we're preparing for a sentencing hearing, you meet with the people you're going to have speak. You get a sense as to what they're going to say, especially if it's written down. You review the entire thing, and you say, wait a second, I realize you're upset, but this is going to rub somebody the wrong way. I would rephrase it. I would, omit certain parts or whatever. And I don't have any evidence that happened here, that attorney review.
I mean, it looked like they were proofreading in real time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they stopped them both. And then Jackie's like, going over the thing. Okay, you start from here now.
Yeah, right.
just read the last sentence, because that's the only thing that seems
left. Yeah, that's all he had left.
I don't know if that's all he had left. I think there might have been more. I'm wondering, or if she's just like, just pick up from here, because all of this is not something we're going to say out loud. That was kind of shocking. But at the end of the day, these are your clients. At the end of the day, I mean, are they, even if you're the attorney and you say, no, don't say this, don't say that, they still can kind of say whatever they want, can they not?
Oh, 100%. And that happens all the time. Thankfully, it hasn't really happened to me, but I've seen it happen.
Because you use shock collars on your clients. They say shit, it's like...
I've got my measures I take. But yeah, I've seen the sentencing hearings where the attorney makes this sort of eloquent, remorseful, moving expression on behalf of their client, and the client just says like fuck you, and just like loses their mind. And yeah, you cannot control it, and it was not controlled here.
What did you make of the moment where after the judge finally like shut them down and said, the utter lack of remorse that you're showing right now being taken into consideration. And then the bubblegum attorneys decided to say, we're going to challenge that. You can't take that into consideration, the lack of remorse at a sentencing. Isn't that just kind of like, I don't know, common sense?
Not only is it common sense, Tony, but it is usually a statutory sentencing factor, oftentimes that the judge has to consider. It's whether there has been an expression of remorse. And so, that's like the one of the number one things judges look for at that time, and some sort of legal objection to such consideration just seems unmeritorious and silly.
Why were they arguing? I mean, look, Jackie, as hard as it is to believe, was a judge. Which, maybe that's hard to believe, maybe that's not, depending on your opinion of judges. But the fact that there was even it seemed just like, it was like, again, it goes back to like children. It's like, if you have zero legal knowledge, you're going to throw that out there. You can't do that. That's against the rules. Like, do you not? Here's the rule sheet. It's on the wall, basically. Or if you're an attorney, you should know the basics. It's the basic ones, and it's right there. To argue it, was that just, we have nothing else, let's just throw this at the wall and waste some more time? And what was the strategy there, if any?
You know, you especially in a homicide case where the sentence is life in prison without parole, you have to leave no stone unturned. You have to err on the side of objecting, because the objection preserves the issue for appeal. And so there is sort of a legal reason to preserve issues for appeal, but not just like any nonsense issues. And I think that, the attorneys lost credibility in doing that. And it was already kind of a train wreck, and they didn't do much to help.
There's still two Adelsons out there, unindicted co-conspirators, Wendy and Harvey. Obviously innocent, never been charged with anything. They maintain their innocence. A spectacle like this, what does that do to the DA? Who's sitting there, that's evaluating their future options, who's already said, stay tuned?
Yeah, there's kind of a sense that perhaps prosecutors should be completely dispassionate and almost like objective robots who are evaluating probable cause and whether there is adequate proof, that kind of thing. That's not what it's like, man. I've been a prosecutor. I've been in those offices. Human beings are human beings, and if there is someone who is sort of poking the bear, who's almost in a taunting and insulting fashion, railing against the side that could consider charges against him. And not only is it a horrible decision legally, but you got to understand that these folks are human. I've seen cases where the prosecutors are talking afterwards and they're saying, do you see how this person is just clearly not taking this seriously at all? And they need a reality check. What could that reality check be for Harvey?
I think we're about to find out.
Did he just put a big target on his head? That where he may have skated off into the villages with the Golden Girls and had a new Blanche every night of the week, but now it may not turn out that way.
Tempting. Yeah, I think that prosecutors have limited resources, especially with their time. They have so many cases. They have to decide which cases they're going to focus on. And perhaps the prosecutor was like, hey, we've got the Adelsons. We convicted, 25 people on this case already, and was going to just let it go. But then when someone jabs at you and intentionally is trying to get under your skin, maybe there's a renewed motivation to continue focusing on that Adelson case.
Yeah. I think there's more questions that need answering there. In your opinion, do you think, I mean, against Harvey, do you think there's going to be more charges against someone in this going forward, or are they going to close the door and say, we got enough?
If I had to predict it, I think charges against Wendy are a little more likely than charges against Harvey. I just think that there's more knowledge that has been established that Wendy currently had of the general scenario. You know, she said she knew, or it came out in evidence that she knew her brother was considering all options, including a hitman. This is the father of your children. I know you hate him, but you know, what actions did she take, if any? I'm not saying she did, but did she take any actions in furtherance of this thing, or in furtherance of a possible cover up, or trying to frame somebody else? All of those things are potential charges.
Is it a crime if she didn't? We know that she knew that her family or her brother was considering it by her own admission. Is that a crime if you don't do anything about learning that your brother is considering hiring a hitman to take out your ex-husband?
Feels like it.
Or could that be argued? I don't know if he's serious or not. He says a lot of things. I mean, how that could be the argument, but legally, how does that stack up?
Generally speaking, in my view, and different people have different views on this, in my view, simply acquiring information about criminal activity does not somehow mean you committed a crime. There has to be some act in furtherance. There has to be some substantial step, some personal involvement that pertains to the information you acquired. And so without that second level, I think just having that information is not a crime. You know, there are some creative prosecutors who think that if you don't intervene, that somehow is grossly negligent and you had some causal link in what happened. And I disagree with that view, but some people see it.
It may not be murder, but is it something, I guess, would be the question.
Yeah, potentially involuntary homicide or negligent homicide. You know, but
and then is it worth it? Is it worth going after her for something that would not stack up to a murder conviction or conspiracy? I don't know. I mean, it's.
But where's it cross the line, though? You know, to talk poorly about your ex because he's a whatever, fill in the blank. You know, where does it cross the line between he's a slimy, lying, cheating, whatever, and I, you know, hope his testicles explode. You know. Where do you cross the line between what you? Sorry, did that just get personal? Gosh, I mean, but where do you cross the line
between? Kind
of
naturally goes there.
Between, you know, I've said that, and if his testicles do explode, does that mean that I'm culpable for it?
Yeah, I would say that it doesn't. I think there needs to be some affirmative action taken, some substantial steps, some act in furtherance, and simply just like hating a guy or having possession of knowledge of criminal activity is probably not enough.
Okay.
You better damn well hope nobody's testicles explodes. Otherwise, this evidence is going to become discovery.
They're coming for it. Yeah.
It's the other woman's problem, not mine.
Yeah.
I don't care. Go for it, baby. You can have him, Lisa. Take him.
All right, that's going to wrap up this episode. Eric Faddis, as always, thank you for coming on and giving your legal expertise. I bet you never thought we were talking about exploding testicles this morning, but
didn't have that on my agenda today.
There's always room for more. Be sure to press subscribe wherever you're downloading podcasts so you don't miss any of our coverage of this and the many cases we're covering for you here. Just search Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski to find all of that. Until next time, for Stacy, for Todd, for Eric, I'm Tony Brueski. We'll talk again real soon.
Want more on this case and others? Then press subscribe now and don't miss a moment of true crime coverage from Tony Brueski and the Hidden Killers podcast.